Okay, so I'm going to start, and I know we're waiting for Assemblywoman Paulin and Assemblyman Magnarelli, and I assume we all have very tight legislative, it's first day back for us. So, first place, I want to thank all of the participants here very much. Also thank Emiliana Ulay, my staff, who did a fantastic job putting together this roundtable. I am Shelley Mayer. I'm a senator from the 37th District. I say because Kevin is here, I was a very proud member of the New York State Assembly as well, where I am the sponsor in the Senate of this bill S-2687. Assemblywoman Paulin is in the Assembly, which was to establish a pilot program for the field testing of mobile phones and portable devices for Westchester County. And we're going to really learn more today from varying perspectives about this issue, the technology that we anticipate if the bill passes, as well as a number of other perspectives on why this issue needs our attention. I'm so glad people are here. The reason I am a sponsor, and Ben Lieberman is here, who's going to sort of lead the discussion on some of the substantive stuff, is as a driver, number one, in the suburbs, I'm acutely aware that distracted driving is going on all around us, and we are not giving law enforcement the tools that they need when things occur, accidents occur, to really stop it and to create incentives to deter people from doing it. We are fooling ourselves if we think that people are simply talking on the telephone when they're driving. And everyone who has stopped at a red light and looks over sees someone else either on Facebook, texting, or sending emails while driving. And we as a state, in my opinion, absolutely must do something to address it. This is a very constructive step forward legislatively. We're happy to have it be a pilot program in the county of Westchester to see how it works, report back, make improvements, but we just cannot stand on the sidelines. And I know Ben is going to talk about his own personal experience, but I would say as a, not really as a parent and grandparent, but as a person who looks around at my community, there is no question that distracted driving by the use of phones is changing our driving environment and is causing profound risks. So I'm happy to be a sponsor. I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and then if the other Assembly members don't come, I know Assemblyman Byrne is going to speak, and then we'll jump directly into the content of the bill. So unless you want to introduce everyone, I turn it over to you, Ben.
I'll speak first, and then as we go around, I'll introduce. But basically, we have stakeholders from a lot of different areas, and I really appreciate Senator Mayer for putting this together. It's a really unique platform to do it this way because we've had certain hearings and things like that, but this is a really nice, organized way to really understand the landscape and to understand what the problem is and what the solution is and why we need the solution. And I'm going to go into some of those details, and then people are going to speak briefly also about it, and we're going to demonstrate the technology. But I'm very appreciative. The way I met Senator Mayer was Mark Gardner and I searched her out because we knew she was a legislator that had a lot of insight and bandwidth, and we went to speak to her about this, and basically we were trying to sell her on the idea of getting involved, and she stopped us mid-sentence and said, I saw this yesterday, I already signed on to the bill. So we were right, she had bandwidth and insight and wanted to get involved, and I was thrilled to work with her. And then Assemblywoman Paulin, I got to meet her a long time ago also because AT&T asked me to speak at schools about our experiences, and I speak at a school in her district, and they asked her to speak as well. So I got to meet her, and then about 2 years later, I was at, I'm also very involved with Westchester Medical Center, and I'm on the board there, and they have their big gala every year, and coincidentally, I was put at the same table as Assemblywoman Paulin, and even more coincidentally, I was sitting next to her, and she told me about the bills she worked on, and she was really, really impressive, and some of them had some major opposition, like the ACLU and things like that, and I always wanted to work with her also, so I was sorry she's not here right now for me to gush over her, but I was always very eager to work with her. And I'm really appreciative of everybody that's in this room here right now because you're the people that are interested and you care, and I just want to thank you for that. The reason I got involved in, and I'm gonna have to drop into some notes now because I'm not a politician. The reason,
Good for
the reason I got involved in this whole distracted driving is because I got the call that every parent dreads. My son was home from college vacation. He was a freshman at the University of UConn, and he was home for a summer. He was working construction at in Woodbury Commons, which is by the Bear Mountain Bridge and by West Point Military Academy. We got the call that there was a car crash, and my son was asleep in the back seat. But he was medevac to Westchester Medical Center, as well as another boy and 3 other people went to local hospital and Good Samaritan. Driver crossed over a double yellow line, said he fell asleep. Route 6 by the Bear Mountain Bridge is a really daunting road. It didn't seem likely that sleeping was a possibility during rush hour. It's old road, commercial traffic. It's windy. It's more known for putting your fingernails in the driving wheel than it is for falling asleep. So we were in the hospital for about a month, and it was a real up and down battle the whole time. And then, unfortunately, on the 30th day, right in front of our eyes, we lost our son. My son died on the 31st day in the hospital at Westchester Medical Center. During that time in the hospital, people would be asking us, do you think it was texting and driving? And honestly, we couldn't focus on that issue. We were, every day we were in a battle, and we were fighting for our son's life and focusing on that. And the idea is that I'm going to focus on my job and let the police focus on their job. And that's what I learned, that the system is broken, that there is no system in place for this. There is no police protocol. And that's a really hard concept for people to understand, that there's no police protocol, because you see a newspaper article and it'll say the cause of the crash is being investigated, and our mind is going that of course they're going to be looking at all the scenarios, but there really is no scenario that this is done. And I could say that, I could verbally say that, but the truth is you just heard my story, because what I did was I went to get the phone records after through a civil lawsuit, because we had doubts. And it took me 6 agonizing months to get the phone records. When I finally got the phone records, it showed texting throughout the drive and near the collision. Now, I was in a dead cell network, like that whole area. Like I said, it's an old, daunting, mountainous road. They're known for dead cell networks also. I couldn't prove what he was doing at the crash, and he couldn't prove that he wasn't doing anything at the crash. Basically, that was our situation. So but this type of thing is happening throughout the whole country. And I'm going to give you 3, let me take one step back. As an advocate, I get contacted all the time now. I mean, you can't believe how often I get contacted about the issue. And I'm going to just read you 3 quick emails that I've gotten to kind of exemplify this situation and try to tell you how this system is broken. So the first one's from South Carolina. Our son was killed by a young man who ran a red light, and we are fairly certain he was on his phone. This is South Carolina. The investigation, which is 4 months old, has been completed and turned over to the solicitor in our area. He said it was very likely that the only charges brought against him for killing our son would be failure to yield the right-of-way or disregarding a traffic signal. We think this is a travesty and want him charged with a stronger charge. The young man still denies it even ran the red light, even though there were witnesses at the scene. We do have a civil suit against him in progress, but phone records have not been checked. Can we get them, or does it have to be law enforcement agency to obtain someone's phone records? Please help us. Hey, please help us. We are desperate and heartbroken. Hey, you missed me gushing over you. The second letter is Kevin Sammy, and his story was from Long Island. And anybody who's at the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, Governor Cuomo ordered a hearing about the Textalyzer. And in Long Island was the second hearing, and Kevin Sammy even came and testified and gave a very poignant talk. And this is initially how I met him was, again, he reached out to me and he sent me this email. My dad, Dr. Mahatma Sammy, was killed on Long Island on June 3rd, 2013. He was hit from behind at 58 miles per hour while completely stopped at a traffic light. The driver's statement was, "I was daydreaming." To this day, he hasn't offered an explanation for his distraction or the crash. He was back on the road the next day. On March 1st, I was actually in Nevada testifying there because Nevada actually has a version of this legislation that they're trying. And what they did, and so the day before I was going to testify, again, somebody reached out to me. So this is very recent. And it's a woman that said, how likely do you think this bill will pass? My reason for asking is on April 4th, 2018, my husband was walking home from his daily walk right here in our community of Desert Shores when a lady drove up on the sidewalk and took his life. He was probably less than 10 minutes from home. She has no explanation as why she came up on the sidewalk. It has taken detectives 10 months to get the final report done. It has taken 10 to get the final report done and to the DA's office. There is an arraignment set for April 18th. They stated several police officers interviewed her and determined she was not under the influence or anything. I have struggled with the idea that she may possibly have been on her phone. Her explanation is she blinked and he was just there. Well, I visited the scene and no way did she just blink and he was there. I have questions why phone records were not pulled, and I was told, and this is what's kind of important, I was told the only time phone records are pulled is if there is a hit and run. I'm not saying she was on the phone, but I'm sure would have liked to rule that out. I'm discouraged with our system. Anything I can do to help get this bill passed, I'll be happy to do so. I feel very strongly about this. Thank you, Teresa Young. So, to really put that in perspective, they weren't really addressing distracted driving when they say that they only look at it for hit and run. Basically, they were going to do a cell phone dump to find people at the location, and they were going to deal with the hit and run, not distracted driving. There is no protocol. There's a problem here. Clearly, there's a problem. When crashes happen, are we supposed to ignore distracted driving? Especially when NHTSA is claiming that texting is 5 times more dangerous than drinking and driving. And also, AAA says that 67% of the population admits to this behavior. So should this be ignored? Because make no mistake, right now it is being ignored. And our idea is to get a respectful and efficient protocol in place. And so what I'm going to read now, is it's very hard to get unanimous consensus on anything, let alone legislation that's balancing public safety and civil liberties. As a matter of fact, well, like I said, on March, I was in Nevada where we had the hearing on the Textalyzer over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you proponents and opponents of the Nevada legislation. And I'm giving you fair warning. I'm about to try to mislead you. Okay, so here's an opponent. I rise in opposition to this bill. It takes freedom away from the individual, and I think these clowns that do 90 to 95 miles an hour are a greater detriment and have no more control over their cars than someone doing this. That's Senator Slattery. And here's a quote from a supporter of the legislation. This is no accident, and when we can educate a large majority of driving Americans that this is not funny, then we will accomplish something. The next 2 quotes are from stakeholders in opposition. Okay? Something must be done to get these people off the road, but this legislation does not address the problem. We should have a subcommittee study the possibilities. So vintage bureaucracy, the worst part of legislation, they all kick the can down the road. Here's another opposition. I've read the book 1984, which is about Big Brother, who brought up laws he felt would help society. This bill is the dawning of 1984. This bill is a naked attempt to legislate morality by making the law so harsh and sociologically damaging. The increasing harshness of these laws is like burning witches at Salem. Eventually, people admit they are witches in order to escape penalties. And the last quote I'm going to read is another one that's in support. You will not get these drivers off the road until 2 things happen. A, people must understand that this is morally offensive and they are doing...
Whoops, Chris, go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
2 things must happen. Either A, the people must understand that this is a morally offensive thing that they are doing, and B, they must understand that there is a substantial likelihood that they will be apprehended. The latter has yet to occur in this state and will not occur simply because penalties have been increased. That was Senator Sater. Now, when I said I was trying to mislead you, what I just did was I tried to direct you that the discussion was about the Textalyzer. And really, it wasn't. What I did was I substitute drunk driving. This was actually legislation from the 80s talking about drunk driving. That was a debate about drunk driving in the 80s. Sobriety legislation was being compared with George Will 1984 and the Salem witch hunt. And that's where we are right now with distracted driving. And And it really was part of the Textalyzer hearing, so I wasn't being completely deceptive. But the Assemblywoman, Amy, Assemblywoman Poland's counterpart in Nevada, who was sponsoring the bill, went all the way back to the 80s to make this comparison to drunk driving, which is also an avoidable, man-made impairment that can hurt innocent people. The Assemblywoman made the comparison because there was clearly a right side of history and a wrong side of history. And she asked her peers in the legislation, which side of history do you want to be on? So fatalities for drunk driving has been cut by 50% since its peak. Do you think any legislator would want to roll back any sobriety laws? So now, the last thing I want to do is I want to shift this from the problem and aim towards what I'm hoping gets accomplished. And I want to be clear about a couple. It's not to invade anybody's privacy, and it's not to ruin anyone's life. And it's not to avoid the important point that good human beings make honest mistakes, okay? Matt Richtel, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who wrote a front-page New York Times story about the Textalyzer, he also penned the seminal book on distracted driving. That's this book right here. Book is called A Deadly Wandering, The Tale of Tragedy and Redemption in the Age of Attention. And the book had a very big effect on me. And the story focuses on, it's a true story, it focuses on 19-year-old Reggie Shaw, who on September 22nd, 2006, while heading to work on a rainy morning in Utah, crossed over a double yellow line and created a lethal chain reaction. Reggie clipped a pickup truck toting a trailer, and then that vehicle collided with two rocket scientists, actual rocket scientists. The two scientists were killed on impact, leaving behind wives and kids. An unharmed Reggie claimed he hydroplaned, and that's what caused the crash. Reggie didn't tell the truth about the crash. It wasn't caused by hydroplaning in bad weather. And immediately after the collision, a very astute Utah State trooper named Bart Rindelsbacher had asked Reggie to be tested for alcohol and drug impairment. During the police car ride over to the station, the trooper noticed Reggie was texting with somebody. Reggie was rapid typing and doing it all with only one hand. And that efficiency gnawed at the trooper. He had a hunch this was somebody attached to his device. So law enforcement went through the very difficult process of subpoenaing Reggie's cell phone records. Those logs revealed there was texting throughout the drive and close to the collision. So this was all mind-blowing to me, because in 2006, when Reggie's crash happened, the iPhone was actually a year away from creating the smartphone phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And texting was legal in every single state. Yet this officer had the insight to pursue the phone records. When Michael Fiddle caused a crash in 2011, causing the death of my son, texting and driving was now illegal in New York. The cell also had a ton more embedded distractions that didn't exist when Reggie crashed. With Fiddle, the cell phone was left in the wrecked car and never recovered. And that's what I found out when I got the phone records, that the phone was still in the car the whole time. No one except me, the grieving father, thought to chase down the phone records. Also, please remember the story that I just told you earlier about the woman in Nevada, the doctor in Long Island, the person whose son was killed in South Carolina, okay? So, the state of Utah, without having any anti-texting laws, actually built the case of reckless driving and involuntary manslaughter against Reggie Shaw. He was sentenced to 1 month in jail, but only served 18 days. And this might seem like a joke of a conviction, but it's one of the stiffest in the country to this present day. Only a handful of drivers have served jail time for killing somebody while using their device. And there are obviously significantly harsher penalties for drunken drivers who caused harm. Now, Michael Fiddle's crash, like I said, happened in a dead cell zone, and although he was texting throughout the drive, I couldn't prove he was texting at the crash, and he couldn't prove he wasn't. And there's value in that also. There was no criminal penalties, and he eventually lost his license for a little while. Now, neither Michael Fiddle nor Reggie Shaw woke up one morning with the intention of killing someone. Michael and Reggie's journeys are so similar and so different in remarkable ways. And by evaluating the two stories, there's actually a light that's shed on me personally about an important topic. The whole concept of justice took on a different meaning to me. When I was on my obsessive quest for justice, and believe me, it was an obsessive quest, I felt like I was doing something selfish. I couldn't stop myself, but at the same time, something didn't feel right. I was theoretically obtaining justice at the expense of somebody else, at the expense of this young man. Although it was almost like I was thinking of this as a zero-sum game, but I believe otherwise now, and Reggie's experience was a major reason. More important than the amount of time Reggie served in jail was his transformation. Throughout the story, Reggie appeared arrogant and aloof, and that was similar to my opinion of Michael Fiddle, who killed my son, and immediately afterwards was on Facebook and playing beer pong, pulling his pants down, dancing on tables and things like that. And my daughters are in the same age area, so it was a very difficult thing. So, I saw that, I experienced that. Now, with mounting evidence presented against Reggie Shaw, Reggie stopped his denial and accepted his penalty. He admitted he was texting. And believe me, it took mounting evidence to do that. And Reggie said to the judge at his sentencing, "I'm embarrassed about how I handled myself. And for remorse to be real, it must be coupled with action." He looked at the injured families and explained, "I'm willing to do anything to gain their forgiveness." Reggie became a voracious anti-texting advocate, and the amount of hours he worked well exceeded his mandate. Matter of fact, he even gave instrumental testimony in Utah banning texting while driving, even though he wasn't required to do so, nor was he even invited to do so. He impressed the grieving families past the point of acceptance. Reggie even worked with some of the daughters on distracted driving projects. So this has not happened to me or for the other victims that I mentioned, the doctor, the South Carolina, Nevada. And FYI, I had offered Michael Phil to join our Charity Evans team and to speak at schools with me. Like, remember I said how I spoke at schools with you. And I didn't know this part of Reggie's history at the time I made that offer. The reality is this stuff doesn't happen voluntarily, and justice serves a purpose. Would Reggie have become an advocate if justice system didn't work so well? Would he have continued to deny and bury the texting issue? Would he have been better off? Would the families have been better off? Would the community be better off? I now believe the justice system provides a lot more value than satisfying victims. And as angry as I am with the Fiddles, I strongly believe the system failed Michael Fiddle as much as it failed the Liebermans. Reggie has a wife now and a daughter currently. I won't say Reggie can exactly hold his head high, but I do believe under the circumstances he did exhaust all efforts to do what was in his power. The community suffered a loss, but at the same time learned a very valuable lesson about this emerging destructive issue. Reggie has been instrumental in the solution. He's accepted and respected in the community and by the victims. I'll make the argument that justice didn't convict him, it actually freed him. And once he didn't have to protect the lie anymore, everything else fell in place. And the last thing I want to talk about is I think it's important to note that under no circumstances do I believe positive results of a Textalyzer should put somebody in jail. It's very easy to miss the point of what this is about. The Textalyzer is the start of the conversation, not the end. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. In this case, the very first link is broken. What an ineffective chain it is right now. The Textalyzer should be looked at very similar to be how a portable breath test is used right now by law enforcement. And that PBT is not used in court for criminal prosecution. That takes further confirmation by sophisticated methods like drawing blood as one example. Similarly, it would take a warrant and a more thorough investigation for anything criminal to be turned at distracted driving. The Textalyzer is merely proposed to detect if usage had occurred. We have a law, 1225D, hands-free usage of a device while driving. If you use your hands, it's a violation, yet it can't be enforced. Let's start the conversation with, was the driver in violation of 1225D? It's nothing. It's a traffic violation, but it's everything. This is fixing the very first and most important link in the chain. And so that's what kind of brings us here now to what our solution is. And the idea was to find a protocol, because we do need a protocol, and to find something that will jump through hoops to respect privacy, to respect constitutional rights, to be effective, efficient, and very respectful. I don't want to be involved in any legislation that's going to be imposing on anybody's personal rights, and I also don't want to bury another child, and I don't want anybody else here to bury another child. So that's why we started working together with Celebrate. I'm going to turn it over to one.
Well, I just want to let my colleagues speak because they all, I'm sure, have to go.
Sure.
So is that
When we
right?
do that, then we can do
Yes,
the
thank you.
demonstration.
So-
But I'm,
Amy is a co-sponsor. Bill Magnarelli is the chair, Assemblyman, chair of the Transportation Committee. Kevin Byrne is here. I think he has a story. And Assemblyman David Buckwell, my colleague from Westchester. So Amy.
Yeah, this is great. I'm so appreciative that you put this together, Shelley. It's very helpful to not only advance the issue, but to understand it. And to my colleagues who are here, thank you for coming, especially to the chair. So, this is the bill that we're talking about is a Westchester-only bill. It's a bill that the county executive has asked us to advance. So I just wanted to frame it that way, and it comes out of the fact that there was a statewide bill that really there was no there was no movement on, and so we thought maybe if we did a pilot, we would be able to advance it. We run into some of the same difficulties, and that's why I'm looking forward to hearing what they are, and maybe Michelle, you can fill in. Michelle, my staff, has been following the bill with me, and any issues that I don't mention, because I think it's important to put them out on the table. And that is the constitutionality of the in light of the Supreme Court decisions, the right to protect that privacy. So to the degree that the gadget that we're talking about only divulges some information, or only the information that we're talking about, and doesn't look at anything else in the phone, is important. We have a password issue as well. Divulging someone's password is problematic in the same frame. So, do we need to do that in order to get at the information? Those are pretty much. That's probably the most important of the two. If we knew that the gadget didn't do those two things,
Right.
then I think that it would be much easier, to advance this. So with that.
Well, I can answer one quick question. Mo's going to be able to address the technology, but the other question you asked is a protocol issue. And there's no password issue with this, because basically the phone never leaves the driver's hands. They open up the phone and plug in, just like the sobriety test. They'll get out of the car and they'll cooperate with the investigation. And so there's absolutely no password issue with this. And then we'll get to the technology about what it can and can't do. But
I know we have a lot of really important guests here, and I appreciate you all being here, all of you. Thank you, and you're gonna get a chance to jump in. Just briefly, Kevin, is that all right? Go, he's been here.
It's okay. Well, first, Shelley, thank you for doing this. And Ben, I think I first learned about this proposal a few years back when we were trying to push forward that statewide proposal. And I'm certainly happy that Westchester County has been outspoken in support of this. I think that is really important to note, that there's a lot of support for this proposal at the local level from all sorts of different people. But I think what I was asked to speak about was more of a personal story, and Ben knows this from going to that press conference a couple of years ago. We talk about drunk driving, we talk about distracted driving, and my circumstance is a little bit different than what Ben went through with his family with Evan, because there was no loss of life. But the very day the day after, I got the nomination to actually run for this office. Like most candidates for elected office, we're on the circuit. I went to a fire department installation dinner and then headed home at around 9 o'clock in the evening, so not that late. On 22 South, I had a person who the weather was fine, but person was coming in the opposite direction in my lane. So, and this is the speed limits there is about 55 miles an hour, and he hit me directly head on. So, if you can just kind of picture it, you're going straight down the state roadway, and then out of nowhere you see, like an instant, a couple headlights just coming your direction. There's nowhere to go. There's a guardrail. There's absolutely nothing you can do. So all you do is hold on to the steering wheel and kind of just pray for your life. But I got entrapped in the car. Fortunately, the other driver of the car was able to get out. Very bad scene, and we had to wait for emergency first responders. My phone was charging in the car, so everything was just shattered. So I didn't have a way to call 911. His phone was supposedly dead, but he later called his mom, so I'm not really sure what happened there. But the way we contacted emergency first responders was from OnStar within the car, and they were able to come in and cut me out of the car. Took me to a trauma center at Danbury Hospital, because where I represent, that's Brewster, we're right on the border, that's the closest trauma center. Eventually it shattered my right patella, and I had to have 2 surgeries, and the rest of the campaign I had to do on crutches. But I think the point here is what you go through, not just during that tragic scene, but the aftermath. I wasn't thinking about how this happened. You're just worried about so many other things. You're worried about your life. I'm worried about, oh my gosh, if I'm gonna get trapped in this car, what's my life insurance plan gonna be? How's my wife gonna be taken care of? How's all these other things you're thinking about? You're not thinking about, was the person texting? Was the person drunk? And law enforcement has those decisions, and they have to have, that mindset. And in many cases, they do. Now, I know with absolute certainty, the other driver, in my case, there was no alcohol or anything like that. They ruled that out pretty quickly. But there really was no other follow-up. And, quite frankly, for me, thank God there was no loss of life. So I didn't really pursue it. But I'm a firm believer in making sure that we give law enforcement the tools they need to be able to follow up appropriately. And I think that's what we're talking about here. There's also this, and I'm not married to one proposal. I think there's probably a lot of things we can do to try to raise awareness for distracted driving. And to Ben's point, we should be discussing this issue not just as texting and driving, but this is really broader. We should be talking about distracted driving, and we should be talking about it the same way we talk about drinking and driving.
Yeah.
So, but that's just, and I appreciate again, Shelley, for you inviting me and just being here.
And Kevin, what did the driver say caused the crash?
Yeah, he said he was asleep. Fell
Right.
asleep at 9:00 in the evening.
Right, so he said he fell asleep, and the guy that did this to Evan said he fell asleep. And right in front of me here is a police report. This is somebody in Evan's grade a year later. I was driving home, electric pole was snapped in half. I couldn't get to my house, I had to actually drive 2 miles around. Obviously, I'm a nut about this stuff. I asked
Please.
well, actually, I'm very friends with the mayor of our town and the police chief in our town. When our town is where Governor Cuomo and Bill Clinton lives, there's just a little trivia there. But my next door neighbor happens to be a fire chief, and he was at the scene. I asked him what happened. He said, "Guy fell asleep," and that's what I got. I got this police report. 19-year-old at 11 o'clock in the morning says claims that he fell asleep at the wheel right before impact. So basically, is this nation, right now, are we taxing our 19-year-olds so much that they're falling asleep so much? Because we've all driven drowsy, and we all know somebody that drove drowsy. I don't know 3 people that did this kind of damage. I'm 57 years old. I don't know how all this could happen in 1 year. In my personal opinion, we've basically been given the dog ate my homework, except now it's not a school issue. Now it's people are being hospitalized, crippled, and killed. And it seriously needs to be addressed. So
And
thank
Ben,
you.
just at one point, I just, I'm sorry, but just, I know we're talking about some of our personal stories. I feel like it's every week or month we're reading about either a New York State trooper gets hit, DOT workers get hit. So, I mean, and it's,
So there's two.
what's the cause? I think it's proper to ask that question. And this, just because I think it's probably helpful to give a visual. I have this on my phone. This was the car that I was in. So, just in case that. So, sorry, thanks.
That's all right. So I know some of the other members, just briefly, because we have a lot of speakers, but the chair, Mr. Magnarelli, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator, for doing this, and I appreciate, we've talked already in my
Yeah.
office, and Amy, thank you, and Bill. I'm not gonna lie, I have a lot of concerns with the bill. I think Amy has already brought them up on the constitutionality of it. Whether it's a pilot or it's something that affects all across the state, it's something that we're gonna have to look at very closely. And there are some issues with that. I've been reading a little bit about this, so I am trying to bring myself up to speed, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm concerned about where this technology really is. I don't know if we have a final product. I know that technology is also moving forward in terms of cars now, where you can put your car basically on hold so you can't get anything and you can't text out. I have questions about education versus criminality. So there's a lot of issues here that have to be dealt with. And I'm very willing to look at all of this stuff and to go into it in depth, but I would be lying to you if I didn't say I have some grave concerns about it.
Thank you.
No,
That's
and,
very
and the fact that you're here having the discussion means the world to us, and
Thank you.
and it's a lot of progress. When we first met and spoke, fortunately, we have a constitutional expert right here on Skype that's going to be able to be dealing with that, so.
Being so patient,
So he'll be better at talking to me, but it's kind of interesting because when we were sitting in your office, so one of the things we share is a love for Syracuse, obviously you a little bit more than me,
A lot more.
but, but the truth is I said, my two daughters went to Syracuse University, so I spent a fortune there, so I feel like I'm a part owner at Syracuse.
We love you too.
And I'm a big basketball fan, and one of the things that you brought up was talking about like the weather in Syracuse and what, examining, a phone after, a normal weather condition and so where the actual protocol starts is something that we could always discuss, and I don't think that's a reason to throw this out. There's a place where it starts, maybe it's not here, but maybe it's where, certain physical damage or injury is. But the point I want to bring up about that is, what was really ironic is a week after you and I met, Jim Boeheim, the coach of Syracuse, killed somebody. And what's kind of interesting, the point I want to make to you about that is that I don't think that he did anything nefarious at all. I mean, it was bad weather, like you said. Somebody else got out of the car, and he hit that other person. But what's kind of interesting is when the reading I heard about it, and you might actually know him, but he doesn't drink.
No.
He's not a drinker. Yet they gave him a sobriety test there, and he blew a 0.0. And it didn't take long. It didn't invade anybody's privacy. It didn't get anything. And what that did is it proved he was innocent also, and there's value to that. And everybody, it was a question everybody was asking, what caused this? Now, they didn't look into any other issue other than that, but it's important, again, we're trying to connect that dot, so I just wanted to bring that issue back up. I think you'll get a lot more comfortable with the constitutionality the more you look at it, and Rick could be a good start in that.
But I don't want to cut you off, I'm just mindful of time. I know my colleague Senator Sepulveda is here. I know. And Assemblywoman Joanne Simon and David Buckwell. So I think if you don't mind, can we go Mo Cook and jump to you
Sure.
on the technology? And Vic Mallison is here representing County Executive George Latimer, the Westchester County Executive, and thank you for that. So, okay,
Yep.
it's in your court.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for your time. Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Ben, for this effort. I met Ben about 2 years ago when he came to my company, Celebrate, and talked to us about Evan and his story. And I've been a supporter of Ben ever since. Personally, I can tell you that my discipline around not texting has changed significantly in the past 2 years. I just don't do it. And I'm very adamant with my family about doing it, and that's all because of Ben. So thank you for that. So who Celebrate and why we're here? So why am I here? So we are a digital intelligence company. We're about 20 years old now, and up until a few years ago, our primary forte was digital forensics around mobile devices. For years, we've helped law enforcement, military agencies, and intelligence agencies get into devices to solve investigations, right? And all this is done with authority, right? So you've got to have a warrant, you've got to have appropriate authority to get into these devices. We do a lot around forensic investigation, and in forensic investigations, you need to understand everything that happened, in that event. And we have the technology that can get at all that information. So that's what we've been doing for a long time. We've got a global presence. We are in about 150 different countries, over 60,000 devices deployed, over 15,000 law enforcement and military users worldwide, and we've got about 40% of the market share. The reason I'm telling you what we do is because the technology to provide law enforcement is available. Everything is doable, right? A lot of it's challenging, but it's very doable. Ben came to us because he knew our history, and one of the things we decided to do was work on a prototype around Textalyzer, a prototype that could get to that information as to whether or not there was activity going on just prior to an accident. So we developed a prototype about 2 years ago, and for the past 2 years, we've been waiting for legislation. So my company was just as compelled about Ben's story as I was, and we've decided to dedicate R&D resources to developing a solution to help. Okay. One of the challenges we have, one of the reasons we kind of did a functional prototype to prove that this could happen, and we haven't fully developed the product yet, which was one of your concerns, was the fact that we need to fully understand the legal requirements so that we can comply. All of the tools that we provide to law enforcement intelligence are legally compliant. We build that flexibility into the tool. Okay?
An example of that is recently Minnesota passed a hands-free law, but they're allowing navigation. So Celebrite's position is they don't want to develop something completely, then have to reverse engineer. So in other words, if Minnesota wanted to do that, they'd have different requirements than anything else. And the way we came across this, we came up, and already suggestions have been coming out to do things differently. So that's,
So can I ask a question about that related, I recently drove my son's car, which is a brand new car, and it has, an ability to text speaking.
Yes.
Now, I didn't quite figure out how to do that, I
Right.
drove the car for a week, so I didn't bother.
Yeah, you can do
But my car can't do that, so I just, can you distinguish?
That's one of the things we're going to talk about
Oh,
in the
okay.
next slide. So
Okay,
you're a
go
great
ahead.
straight woman.
Okay.
We set the next slide up. Rough.
Okay.
But one of the things I'll say is that, you talked about call records earlier. There's a lot more you can do on the phone that you can't get from call records.
exactly, yeah.
So you need technology to look at the device.
A simple
levels.
email doesn't show up in call records, nor social media, or taking selfies, or playing Candy Crush, or looking at YouTube, or all these different distractions that are out there now that didn't exist when that other example I gave you was.
Okay. So again, we're committed to this, just like all the other products we develop to assist law enforcement and everyone else. Once the product's available, we'll support it for the long haul. Functionality. Let's talk a little bit about the operation of what we envision a Textalyzer to be. Essentially, this product works by analyzing logs that are created by the mobile operating system and the apps themselves. So we'll talk about this in a second, but when you use an app on the phone, there are databases. In the databases where all the content is. There are also logs because that application has to talk to the operating system to do things on the phone. In those logs is where the functions occur. Okay, so we look at those logs between the app and the actual operating system of the phone. We look at the operating system logs. We do not look into the application databases, all right, for Textalyzer. The next slide will demonstrate that more. Today, just to prove functionality, we can detect whether or not outgoing calls occurred. We can detect if an incoming call was answered. We can detect outgoing SMS text messages. And we can detect whenever the keyboard was opened on some of the most popular apps that we all use on our phones. What we've done, we haven't just stopped at what we did in the prototype. We're waiting for legislation, but we're also developing at the same time, doing a lot of it. But we also have worked on detecting screen touch. So just ensuring if you touch the screen, maybe you're playing a game, right? You're not really using the screen, you're not making a call, but you're playing a game and you're swiping. We can detect whether or not that was going on as well.
So to answer you, so it detects typing and swiping.
Speaking, not.
It's a text typing and swipe, illegal typing and swiping, but differentiates between legal voice activation and Bluetooth.
Right, and that was the next bullet, that the technology is available to differentiate between a voice-activated activity and the screen, so whether you're using voice activation or Bluetooth. And again, we're committed to developing whatever we need to do as technology changes, which happens all the time and new apps come on board. I want to be very clear, so we put this slide together just so that everyone can see it. We've been doing forensic investigations on digital devices for a long time, and you do that in a number of ways. We do a logical, a file system, or physical extraction. Not going to get too technical, but those are the extractions we use for forensic investigations. Those are the things that can get into content, get into deleted information, etc. That's what we've been doing for years. Textalyzer is not that. We do not access those databases. We do not access the memory on the device. We do not do that stuff. We do not reconstruct deleted information. Textalyzer doesn't do that. It is focused on log access, which is huge with regard to privacy protection, right?
So if we merely said in a bill, for example, that you were prohibited from getting call, whatever the things are that are not you know, the other things, like pictures, videos, call history, contacts, text messages.
Recipients' phone
No,
numbers,
right,
all et
we
cetera.
said you were actually prohibited and only allowed to get the keyboard usage, activity logs, I don't know what activity logs are exactly.
Mhm.
The app logs, don't know what that is either.
Okay.
You know, because you don't wanna authorize something that would be privacy protected.
Absolutely. So if you use that verbiage, that would be accurate and that would support what we're doing with the tool. What we mean, just to be clear about activity logs, your computer, any digital device, this operating system, Windows or Mac OS, whatever, it logs whether or not an app started or memory was accessed or keyboard was used. It logs that as part of the operation of the tool. That's what it's looking at, not what's
Can I-
actually going on.
Can I just interrupt with a sort of the simple person's way I think of it? So I'm on Facebook while driving.
Mhm.
You get the log that shows I opened the Facebook app, but does not show what page on Facebook I went to.
Doesn't show who you're connecting to, what, any of that, what you're typing in text itself.
How long you were on Facebook?
Yeah, the length of time is showing in the
It
log.
is not detecting the length of time. If that's something that you want the tool to do, something we develop, it will detect whether or not you opened the keyboard in Facebook. And when the time you open the keyboard, that's it.
Does it say when you closed it? Or-
It does not. We could get it to do that, but
And the idea is also that the final version is going to have when you're actually swiping on Facebook and
Yeah.
doing activities. It can actually get the activity, that's what he means by activity logs, in doing it without actually seeing the
correct.
And what about the app logs, what's that?
Application. So that's at the activity logs are at the operating system. Every application itself has databases where it stores content, and they have logs. How does it talk to that operating system? Because normally, if I'm on this computer, I hit the keyboard, or my phone, I use a keyboard. That's the operating system doing it. If I'm in an app, that app has to call to that keyboard. So there are logs for those. That's separate from the databases that can maintain content.
I'm sorry, is this only when the app is visible on the screen, or if it's like I looked at Facebook this morning and it's probably still running on my smartphone?
There's a timestamp when you open the keyboard. That timestamp is included. So we'll give you the timestamp, the fact the keyboard was open. We'll give you a timestamp. the
And
fact
to
it
answer your
was
question, the protocol,
Would it show it like now, like,
the
because I
pro-
opened it?
the protocol would be, on this, wouldn't be to get you a whole day.
Okay.
You know, you're gonna basically be
moment.
around the time of the crash, and it's gonna be from that point on, so that's gonna be irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I guess my one question.
If
is
it's
like-
running in the background, it's not
Yeah.
gonna make a difference, because you're not typing and swiping on it.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'll be clear, we can limit that, right?
Yes,
That-
you
This
can
is
limit it.
why we are here, and we need legislation to tell us what to develop in the tool. If you say at the scene, when you invoke Textalyzer, it can only show the logs for the past hour, we'll do that, right?
I see,
That's-
you could do it. From a law enforcement point of view, you might want to have a limited period of time.
You absolutely
What
want,
you're
you
looking
you
at.
absolutely wanna have a limited time.
And the other thing is, Instagram, Twitter, each of these has, you're educating us, has a separate app log
Yes.
that shows the open, and it could be restricted to a certain time period in the bill. And I know this is jumping ahead, but I assume you're not the only game in town in this whole new technology world of finding the ability to track this.
Right. So,
But you've been working with Ben, so we're thrilled you're here.
I'll address that. We're definitely not the only game in town, right? So we've been around for 20 years. We probably have the largest R&D organization in the world, with
Uh-huh.
space intelligence. We're typically first to market, but our competitors generally see an opportunity and
Jump into.
And I
develop
re-
technology as well.
And I readily say that if anybody else could eat their lunch, it's no problem by me.
No.
And when I historically leave, if I open an app, I leave it there, I don't always, and then I think, I've got 20 open, and I delete them all. What about, are you detecting that? So in other words, my Facebook was open because I did it yesterday.
We're not
No, it's
detecting that today, right? We're not
So
looking
you're
for
not,
that
so when
today.
you say activity logs, you're only saying what was open, not what had been opened earlier.
Right. It'll detect, depending on how we design the tool, it can go back as far as allowed, right? But it's only gonna detect that when that keyboard was open, when that SMS message was actually sent, when that call was actually placed, and it'll give a timestamp. So,
But I opened it yesterday, I
And you
left
wiped
it
it,
open,
okay.
but today, right before the accident, I went back and used it.
okay. If you went back and used it, when you open it back up, and if that keyboard was open, it'll
Okay.
register the time the keyboard was open. Because you might be in Facebook, but you might not be using the keyboard, right?
I see.
Okay.
So that's the key thing, when
Yeah.
the
The
keyboard.
keyboard usage.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the only,
That might be the word, some of the
those,
words
yeah,
used.
keyboard usage.
Okay.
Okay,
And I think on the previous slide, we kind of mentioned keyboard usage, so we're focusing on that for now. All right, but there's lots of flexibility as to what can be built in. Again, just kind of a summary. No user content can be accessed, only the logs. First protocol is just to determine if activity was occurring. If you show activity was occurring, after that, if you get authority, get a warrant, we could go back and do a forensic investigation. That's a separate protocol, not part of Textalyzer. Again, it's portable. This is what we designed it to work on. It can work on the typical tablets that are inside of law enforcement vehicles, right? And it's designed so that we could just plug in directly, and I'll jump to the next slide. We can just plug in directly, and the motorist doesn't have to surrender their device, right? They could just, I'm going to comply, it's unlocked, plug in, and typically if you plug in, what will happen is they comply, they plug in, if they hit go, you can see activity starts beginning, the Textalyzer device is talking to the phone. Once it's done, the results are shown. And those results, you can see the top says SMS message. It just says that an SMS message was sent and the timestamp, nothing else.
Do you need them to put their password in?
They will need to have the phone accessible. We're not going to unlock the password, right? This is totally a compliance
just
thing.
like a- right.
Absolutely.
it's voluntary.
We can do all that, but that's not part of Textalyzer, right? They have to volunteer. They have to put us on a locked phone. We're not going to put lock backpass into this device. Okay?
So just walk through that. The first one, SMS sent.
The first is a sent SMS message and a timestamp. The second is a native incoming call that was answered, right? Meaning they answered the call. The next was a Facebook keyboard. The screen was open, and then the WhatsApp screen that was open, right? Just from analyzing a phone, okay? From analyzing the logs of the phone.
But it
that's-
doesn't say it used, it just says it's an open app.
Just open. It opened the keyboard. The call screen was open.
Not
right?
that it's been open, it was just open.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's
time-
just open.
It's
there's a-
timestamping
there's
when
a
it was open.
timestamp of when the
Oh,
call
oh,
screen was
It's not,
open.
it's not evaluating what's in the background, it's showing the activity that had happened.
I got it,
Okay.
It could, something else, three other things could be running in the background already.
right.
And not to talk long, but that's essentially the
That's great.
how the technology works. That was kind of an online video demo. Later, if we have time, I can actually do live demos to show that it doesn't take very long.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And I know we have other folks, and I know we have Rick, but I,
go to the office, I can't use it.
Chief Ferry, I think it'd be useful if you talked a little bit about, from a law enforcement point of view, your perspective, and thank you for being here.
I think you're also gonna get Rick
Say,
Rick Simmons for the constitutional.
I know, I have him
Yeah.
next.
Okay, good, because he's
I
got
have,
time.
oh, you have a time? Okay. Rick,
Okay,
can
good.
you wait a few minutes?
Okay.
Chief?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. We give out a lot of tickets in Newcastle for distracted driving, for people using a mobile device when they're driving. We give out about 500, I know we give about 500 a year for the past 3 or 4 years. And we give them out because the officer sees the person. That they drive by, they see the person on the phone. We get to the scene of a crash,
Yeah.
and there's no alcohol. Alcohol we know, right? We'll have some odor of alcohol in the breath. Drugs, maybe we have some instances of evidence in their eyes, or evidence in the way they're acting. When we get to a crash or one car accident, middle of the day goes off the road into a tree, and we get there, where's that evidence that the person was on the phone? The phone could be there, but there's no residual evidence that we're gonna be able to see without having this technology. And so what's happening is, the contributing factors on accident reports is being attributed to other things. The person was sleeping, whatever it is. We're not collecting the data that we need to collect to show people how prevalent this problem is. That lives are being lost, people are being injured, but we're not getting the data. The data is being lost because the phone is sitting there. And Ben compared this device to the alpha sensor. Since you know But anyway, Ben compared it to the alpha sensor, and the alpha sensor is a Textalyzer which is evidentiary breath test. An alka sensor is a small box officers carry in the car. And if they suspect alcohol, they could use that. All it's telling the officer is alcohol is involved or alcohol isn't involved.
Right.
And then you have a fork in the road. If alcohol isn't involved, why did this person crash? It could have been drugs, 'cause it doesn't measure for that. But that's similar to what this is. This is similar to the alka sensor. All it's telling us is the person was on the phone, the person wasn't on the phone. And so as far as the constitutional issues, if you look at an alka sensor, what we're searching there is the person's their body. We're searching their body, what's going on in their body. We're going through a blood test. We're taking blood out of the insertion. So, you know, comparatively, we're looking to see if somebody touched the screen on a phone. It's really,
Much less.
it's less of an issue in my mind. But I really believe we need something to be able to show that the phone is or proven innocent, so it wasn't being used. Maybe this isn't the problem everybody thinks it is. We start collecting this data and we find out it's not. But really, we want to be able to check that box on the accident report that says cell phone involvement, smartphone involvement. So then we can all see what the problem is. Maybe the public sees what the problem is, and we stop losing people because a lot of them think this isn't an issue because we don't have the data to show it. And this is, I know Ben's put a lot of time into, we're still talking here, we're still talking not even about addressing the problem, we're talking about finding out what the problem is. We need to move on, and hopefully, you know, people see the wisdom in this and the need to have it.
Yeah, there was, they wrote roughly about 2,000 distracted driving tickets in Newcastle, and the officer has written one at the scene of a crash, and that was because it was a car that hit a truck, and the truck and the passenger in the trunk was able to look down and visually identify. Where we stand right now is without an eyewitness or a confession. That's it, there's nothing that's there, so.
But also, I would just say, and I'm interested in my experience with the police in Yonkers, is that there's not a great incentive to get people to get off their phones. Because you could be driving and an officer next to you and says, you know, turn off your phone. You're not in an accident, and they will or they won't. There's not a sense that this is really as prevalent as I believe it is in terms of causing danger. Certainly, I would be interested to hear from the insurance companies. We think for rear-ending, this is very, very prevalent without bodily damage, that, you know, car accidents occur, but we'll get into that. So, can we go to Rick Simmons?
Rick, you okay?
Rick, you good? You wanna identify yourself?
You know, everything?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great, good. Thanks for inviting me. I wanted to make sure I appreciation to be able to share this with you. The first thing I want to say is that I'm obviously not a policy expert. I'm going to leave the costs and benefits to you all as far as whether it's a good idea to do this, but I do come with some expertise on the Fourth Amendment. I've written a casebook on the Fourth Amendment. I've taught the class on the Fourth Amendment for a while, so I do know a little bit about that.
Can you tell us
And
where
so
you
I
are?
could be-
Where you are? We
I'm
only
in,
see you on a TV screen.
Yeah, I'm at the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay,
I've
good.
been teaching there for 15 years now.
And
New York Times, graduate Columbia Law School, so I have been in New York and,
former New York prosecutor also.
Okay. All right,
Sure.
so jump in.
okay. So anyway, I guess my brief explanation of this is I do believe this bill as written is constitutional. It does not create any Fourth Amendment problems. There are three reasons for this, and each of these three reasons essentially is independently justified. They're not dependent upon each other. So I'll briefly go through these. I'm happy to answer questions or to talk about this later. The first is essentially under the reasonableness clause of the Fourth Amendment. Essentially, the courts give us a balancing test when they look at a government search of some kind. The test is how intrusive is the search versus what are the Fourth Amendment rights of the person being searched. So, for example, a very intrusive search, like a body cavity search, is very hard to get, whereas a less intrusive search, if you're just watching someone in public, there's no Fourth Amendment problem. Here in this case, as we've already heard, the intrusive search is very low. The phone's not being seized for hours or days. It's for a matter of minutes or seconds, as far as I can tell. Very brief time. The information being gathered is not really very private. It's akin to a lot of other kinds of metadata from a phone, which does not have constant protection. That is who you're calling and how long that call is. Courts have said that's not protected. The constitutional rights of the person being searched is a little bit lower than other people. You have your highest constitutional rights when you're in your home. Some people have no constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, like prisoners who are incarcerated. But there's a spectrum of how many rights someone has. Students in high school have fewer rights. It turns out drivers also have fewer constitutional rights. Drivers who've been in accidents also have fewer constitutional rights. So you have someone with less Fourth Amendment rights, and you have a very low level intrusiveness. On that level alone, I think this is constitutional. The second reason is under what we call the special needs doctrine. This is something that police and law enforcement do routinely. If a search is not meant for a law enforcement purpose, that is not for crime control purpose, but its primary purpose is for safety, the courts have given law enforcement quite a bit of leeway in conducting surveillance. So we've a lot of examples of these. For example, searching buildings for building code violations is considered a special needs search. The drug driving checkpoints, breathalyzers, those are special needs searches for public safety. When you're searching for an airplane, that's a special needs search. For none of those examples do you need to have any kind of individualized suspicion or warrant or anything like that. Law enforcement can do these searches when they need to because they want to ensure that there is they're trying to ensure public safety. So in this case, that is, I think this feels squarely into that category. The Textalyzer is intended to keep roadways safe. And so I think it would be a special needs search. It would be allowed under that doctrine as well. Finally, the last justification for this would be under what we call the binary search doctrine. Under the Fourth Amendment, you have the right to a reasonable expectation of privacy for a legitimate expectation of privacy. That is, if we can prove that you're doing something illegal with the search, and we know that ahead of time, the search, in other words, only finds evidence of illegal conduct, then it's not covered by the Fourth Amendment. The best example of this that we know of is the drug dog searches. So if the police have a drug dog that sniffs your car or your suitcase, they can take that dog to your car or suitcase whenever they want to. They don't need individualized suspicion. That's because the dog only alerts if you're doing something illegal. So all the information the police get are essentially, are you conducting illegal conduct or not? They get no other information about you. That's a binary search. They're relatively rare, but with technologies like these, they can become more common. Here, the Textalyzer, if we take a driver's phone, if they had an accident, we see they've been on their phone in the last, it depends on how long we have, 10 or 15 minutes. That's a very strong indication of conducting illegal activity, and therefore it would be kind of a binary search in the sense that all the information they're getting really is the person conducting illegal activity, and so that is again not covered by the Fourth Amendment. So as I've gone through this kind of quickly, I want to make sure there's time for questions and for other people to speak, but I'm happy to answer questions and talk about these more if you want.
Questions? Mr.
My
Chairman?
first question is, what happens when the person says no?
When the person says no to the,
No.
yes.
To the search?
That's more of a protocol issue. And the way.
I don't know where.
Well, if
it's
somebody,
statute
the same
says.
thing is, I guess if somebody says no to a portable breath test, there's a protocol there. And where we wrote in the original legislation, which I have to admit was kind of my mistake, that got brought out, was that it's a license suspension, nothing like going to jail or something like that. It's not a criminal activity, it's driving privileges. If you speed too much, they take away your license. If you blow through red lights, if you don't even pay tickets, they could take away your license. So we had this as administrative, but if we're really gonna keep this at the level of a portable breath test, it's a violation for doing that. Now, police could do other things. They can go about, like, the chief could probably explain better what would happen if somebody refused a portable breath test. But it's
It's a ticket, a traffic ticket, for the portable breath test, a traffic ticket.
Traffic ticket.
If it intoxicates, once you bring it to headquarters or wherever you're gonna take the evidentiary breath test, then they stand to lose their license if they don't take the test.
But at the moment, to I think Mr. Magnorelli's question,
That's a concern. I mean, losing a license is more than
but
nominal.
that's a second step.
Yeah, right.
So the first
No,
step, I'm sorry,
right.
just the bill says that basically you shall submit your mobile telephone or portable electronic device to the police officer. In the case of the portable breathalyzer, which has a different name, if you do not consent, you simply get a
Traffic ticket.
traffic ticket.
Yeah. But
If I could
is there,
jump in
is
for a
there,
second.
is there proof of any violation at all if someone says no?
Is
I
it,
mean, you come upon an accident, whatever it is. There's a cell phone on a seat.
Yes.
That proves nothing.
What's,
It
Right.
proves nothing. It doesn't prove that the person was on the phone or wasn't on the phone.
And when Jim
It's
Boeheim,
nothing.
when Jim Boeheim killed somebody, there was no proof that he was drinking.
Please stop. No, I understand, but what I'm saying, what is the protocol? I guess this is what I need to learn, need to
Yeah.
see. What is the protocol if someone says, no, I'm not gonna do this, I don't want my
Yeah,
phone
sure.
touched, I don't
The
want
chief-
it
the
looked at.
chief-
And
I
they
think
haven't violated that.
let the chief, why don't we let the chief answer
Okay.
what actually happened?
So just to
Sorry.
put it with
No, it's a good idea.
using the portable breath test device, when there's we don't use a portable breath test device at every crash. It's a totality of all the evidence, which this would be also. So if you have a crash where everything seems to be just an accident, wherever it might be, you may not wanna look at that person's phone. But if something with that investigation leads you towards thinking like one car accident, like I said, into a tree in the middle of the day, that may be a time you wanna ask them for that information. I don't see this being used at every single crash scene, more at crash scenes where the evidence indicates that it could have been a phone, it could have been somebody on their phone.
But can I just,
And it's the
and-
implied consent, the person gives the implied consent, that they'll take it if they don't. So the actual infraction is the person is not taking the test.
yes,
It's
it's the
not giving you the
infraction
phone.
is the failure to turn over your phone or the failure to
Right.
refusal to take the test upon a reasonable request of a police officer.
And reasonable is what I'm talking about.
Yes. So I don't know, I understand, it's not guilt, it's just that you didn't do what somebody asked you to do,
Unless you
which,
get a traffic ticket.
Right. and the
You
laws-
get a traffic
The law would
ticket.
say you're gonna give your phone if an officer reasonably asks you, I assume, something like that. And if you say no, you get a traffic ticket.
I think it's into other
Rob-
issues as well.
But-
maybe Rob has a perspective too, Ed, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Rick,
Rick,
Yeah, I just-
Rick.
And again, I'm not gonna talk to the policy
Sorry,
issues there, but again, from the constitutional standpoint, as it's pointed out, this is something routinely done in breathalyzer tests. The Supreme Court has unequivocally ruled that it's okay to take someone's driver's license for refusing to take a breathalyzer test, and I think all 50 states have some kind of administrative provision for that, so this would not be an outlier at all in that sense.
and that was confirmed in the Birchfield case, but the real answer that you're asking is, let's find the area where you're comfortable. Is it a ticket? You don't throw this whole, my opinion is, don't throw the whole idea of setting up a protocol. Find out what people are comfortable at, and let's get to the right place on where they are. But the answer shouldn't be, let's kick the can down the road and not address this issue, in my opinion.
So the traffic ticket is what? Is it points? What's the traffic ticket level for?
I'm not sure what that violation, but it'd be like any other traffic
DOT.
ticket. It's not, it's issued at the scene, the person goes and comes back to court. I'm not sure if that's a moving violation or not. I'm really not a fan.
You know, Michelle? No.
We
Yeah,
can check,
we
we'll
don't
check.
have
No, we do have it in the context of,
Yeah, they do have, if you
Refusal
refuse,
to
if you
I'm
refuse a
talking-
portable breath
I'm
test.
thinking if we
Breathalyzer,
model it
Yes. Yeah,
after the
model that.
alcohol, that's all. So I'm wondering what that is. Or model it a little less, cause we're unsure. You know, I don't know. I don't know what like if it's a expensive ticket or, you know,
Points.
what the law says, I don't know. You know, but a ticket at least is nothing. You know, and it depends on if it's
Depends on
points.
who you talk to.
Yeah. All right, it depends on who you talk to.
That's right.
Yeah.
so, additional questions for Rick? I just wanna make sure everybody gets a chance. No?
What
Okay.
was that court case that we thought this broke? That was-
Riley?
Riley.
Riley versus California? Well,
Yeah.
Rick will be able to, Rick, you want to talk about Riley versus California?
You're on mute.
Unmute,
You're
Rick.
mute. You're muted.
Rick?
Wait,
I
stop
want
talking.
to get your perspective.
There you go.
Yeah, I get that question a lot about Riley, and it's a legitimate question. Riley is a very important case. Supreme Court essentially put the data of cell phones into a different category, basically said that data in cell phones gets more protection than other kinds of data, more so than data on computers or data you might keep, you know, in your briefcase, let's say. Riley was very specific, essentially saying that the information on our cell phones is so comprehensive and so intimate that it deserves special protection. And so certainly if you were going through the data on the cell phone, that would be very strongly protected, more strongly than data you have anywhere else. So it's very important that Textalyzer does not look at the data. It only again looks at, I guess, what you might call metadata, although I'm sure our solid right expert would have better terms for that. But essentially, when something is opened, when something is used, is metadata, which is not what Carpenter was talking about. If you read the Carpenter decision, it's very specifically talking about the data inside the phone itself, not whether or not the phone is used. So again, whether or not you place a phone call, how long the phone call lasts, that's a different category that does not get any protection. In fact, it's not even protected by the Fourth Amendment under current case law. So I do think we have to distinguish between what kind of information you're gathering from this procedure. Just because it's a cell phone, that's not a magic word, meaning that everything you do with a cell phone is protected. What the question is, what information are you getting from the cell phone? And this, as described, does not get at that kind of data that Riley was protecting.
Yeah, Riley versus California didn't say that phone can't get scanned, because I know I had to scan my phone to get into this building today. You know, so it's you know, and to get a little bit more specific about what it was that there's an incident to arrest doctrine that police have to, that if they're worried about their, let me take one step back. You always needed a warrant to get at content. There was never a doubt about that. Content, you always needed a warrant. Nobody's disputing that. The incident to arrest doctrine allowed police to access information if they were worried about the evidence being destroyed or if they were worried about their own safety. So they used Riley versus California as an example of incident to arrest, and the court said, incident to arrest, you still need to get a warrant for it. But there was every doubt that you need a warrant for content. And there's plenty of examples where phone records don't need a warrant, or phones get scanned at airports or in buildings like this, or everything like that. Of course, it didn't say it, and that's what it is. Your phone's not a religious object. The content is what's sacred, and that's the issue.
And we also can, as Amy said, look at trying to mirror or use as a basis the current standard for the portable breathalyzer. So, do you want more for Rick, or can we move and make sure Rob?
Anybody else have a question for Rick? Any constitutional questions?
Okay, so,
I'm here for a half hour, so.
Oh,
okay,
great.
good.
Thank you, Rick.
So Rob Greenstein, Town of Newcastle Supervisor, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I mean, listen, you know, I'm sitting here and listening to everything. I mean, there is definitely a problem. You know, there's an adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, there's a problem, and it needs to be fixed. And, you know, we can't count on the car manufacturers to fix it, because they ain't. You know, they could fix it in 2 seconds, but they don't want to, and they haven't done it yet. So, when we started our distracted driving initiative in Newcastle, part of the reason I started is because, first of all, I know Ben is a resident, I know what happened with his son, and I didn't know there's a problem because I have eyes, and I see everybody texting. And so we started, and the first hour of our initiative, we gave out 12 tickets. Okay, so I don't really need to see that to know there's a problem, because again, we have eyes, but we gave out 12 tickets. And I said something on Facebook that Ben actually appreciated, and it's, imagine if we just gave out 12 tickets for drunken driving in 1 hour, okay?
Yes.
Nobody would come to our town. They'd be like, stay away from Newcastle, that's a dangerous place. Well, we've given out 2,000 tickets now. Imagine if we given out 2,000 tickets for drunk driving. Now, I don't have the actual stat in front of me as far as the danger versus drunk driving versus distracted driving, but I think they're equivalent if you actually look at the stats, and I guess you can speak to that as well, but they're pretty equivalent. So imagine 2,000 tickets for drunk driving in Newcastle over the last years. Nobody would go near Newcastle. We're not any worse than any other community. This is happening every town, everywhere, and it's not just with alcohol, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where maybe alcohol, the occurrences are a little more focused on Friday nights or Saturday nights or things like that. So this is a major, major problem that has to be dealt with. And it's not, and this will help us deal with it. And we have a right to be on the road and to be safe too. And, you know, you look at seatbelts also. I mean, I know, Ben, what you did was great, by the way. You know, there's the first time I ever heard that, where you used those comments from, you know, when they were talking about the breathalyzer. And I'd be curious also to hear some of the comments when they were talking about the seatbelt law. You know, I grew up, we didn't wear seatbelts. You know, I still go like this with my, you know, kids, and even though, because my parents did that with us, to protect you from going through the windshield, right? And I don't know why I do it, because I've always had kids with seatbelts, but the point is, though, I would be curious to hear some of those comments. Some people probably said, who is the government to tell me to put on my seatbelt? Now you wouldn't even think about getting in a car without your seatbelt. And we're going to get to that point with this, too. It's just a question of how long it takes us to get there, how many more people are going to get killed. Because there's a problem, and it has to be addressed. And I know that from the community level, and any community can be the same. You know, it's happening everywhere.
Can you just inform people, what's the population of the town of Because you gave this example of.
17,000 people, close to 18,000 people.
Wow.
We have 2,000 tickets. And by the way, and the chief can talk about this too, some of these people are repeat offenders. And,
Yeah.
and something I have in my notes, and I don't want to take up too much time, but part of the problem is also is that when you use the analogy to alcohol, why it's so important is because, and I also say, well, it usually takes place maybe on Friday and Saturday nights. Well, not if you're an alcoholic. You could be drinking all day long, right, because you're an alcoholic. We are addicted to our phones. And, like, let's not forget that component of it. We are addicted to our phones. If you're on the phone and your car beeps, you got something in your brain, and this, remember we spoke to that guy, who would like say, like a little...
An internet addiction specialist.
Right, I mean, like a little mouse or something, like if something in your brain goes off and you want to see who just texted you or something. We are addicted to our phones. It's a problem. We're growing up now with these phones, and so we're not really understanding the addiction, but we are addicted to our phones. And that's something that we need to understand. So as if we're all alcoholics, driving 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, drunk, because that's what's happening here with these distracted driving occurrences. So I don't remember what your question was, it's about
Well,
the
my also
population,
question
but...
was, in your community, since everyone hears from all over the state, how much support is there for your added initiatives on
That's a
distracted
great question. I was
Right,
gonna
and
bring that up.
And that was actually what I was supposed to talk about, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I didn't know that. I didn't know.
That was in my parentheses.
You're good.
Now you're politics.
Right.
Someone's got to be elected somewhere.
Believe it or not, there is support. I mean, I remember we once had a meeting with the National Traffic Safety Bureau, and they said, did you get a lot of opposition because you're giving away your residents all these tickets? And I said, well, luckily I was too stupid to think about that, because it didn't occur to me. What occurred to me was that we have a problem, we have to address it, and believe it or not, there's been a ton of support, even though
Yeah, I'm
people are
sure.
getting tickets, there's been a ton of support because everybody recognizes we have a problem and it has to be addressed. So there's been support, and what I was saying also, we have a lot of repeat offenders. So getting the ticket, and we have a distracted driving diversion course that we, give people the option to go to, but people are still doing it because there's addictions and it's a real problem.
But the point that what ended up happening is Rob, they gave warning about this. We're gonna start cracking down on this. We're giving you fair warning, and they gave warning, and they created magnets which people actually put on their cars, and they had banners throughout the town, and they rolled out this whole campaign about this. And he said, and then he warned that said we're gonna start enforcing this fair warning. Then the first day they wrote this 12 tickets in an hour, and Rob sends out an email to the town saying we just got 12 tickets. It was during school busing hours in the morning. We got 12 people. Imagine if this was drunk driving. You can't believe the support he got for it. It was like, do more of this.
And we have.
Because
But it's
nobody
not-
thinks it's gonna be them, that's why.
And it's not like the numbers are going down, by the way, right? So, I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's not happening.
I just want to acknowledge my colleague, Assemblymember Nader Sage from Yonkers, my neighbor and friend here. Thank you for being here. John Corlett from the AAA. John, can you add your perspective? I don't know.
Oh, sure, yeah, thank you, Senator, for holding this event, and thank you, Mr. Lieberman. And I'm just going to work off my notes here. We have 2.7 million members in New York State, 60 million in the United States and Canada. We have a foundation for traffic safety based in Washington that funds a lot of research into these issues. And I can tell you, it's not your eyes. All the data and research shows that the number of people texting and emailing behind the wheel is pretty significant. National, and I won't bore you with stats, but the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says that the use of handheld devices has tripled since 2006. We do a traffic safety culture index every year. And we also survey, people about their actions and behaviors behind the wheel. Everybody's opposed to texting. They think that it's dangerous.
But they do
But 31% of drivers admit doing it in the last 30 days. Another 8% say they do it often. And 40% of drivers admit reading a text message or email, and another 11% admit to doing it often. So right there's 51%.
These are of your members?
These are of drivers, yeah. So it's not your eyes. It is happening out there on the road. One of the things we do at AAA, we're an advocate for driver rights, but we're also a safety advocate. So when this proposal first came along a couple of years ago, we were quite frankly having a lot of internal discussions.
Sure.
And I think either you were all for it or you were against it. So we submitted comments to the Governor's Traffic Safety Administration. I brought a copy. I'd be happy to share it with your staff.
great.
Imagine
So
we
what I
recommend-
tried.
Recommending a pilot.
Yeah, we recommended a pilot, so great minds think alike. So, you know, what I was thinking is, you know, a pilot program would give us a chance to answer a lot of these unanswered questions. We're coming out on the side of safety, and, you know, we did put a lot of thought, and I would encourage anybody here, I'd be happy to share.
I'll vouch that they put a lot of thought in it.
Also, we did a research report in August of 2017, highlighting distracted driving in general around the state, and I have a copy of that here too. We did highlight best practices in towns like Newcastle, and a couple of other towns, Cornell University, New Paltz, and Ulster County. So, again, there I'd be happy to share that with everybody here. One of the interesting things we found when we were doing this report, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Senator, is you know, it doesn't appear to be a priority, or something. I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but in fact, in our report, we found that the New York City Police Department and the New York City or the New York State Police issue the vast majority of tickets in New York State. So, with the exception of some of the great work towns like Newcastle are doing, there's probably a little bit more that a lot of these local. You know, I have an office in Garden City, near a busy intersection in Mineola. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that area, but the number of tickets issued in Nassau County by the Nassau County Police, with all due respect to them, is a handful. And I probably could walk down to the corner of my office on Franklin Avenue and Old Country Road and see people, you know, texting. Another interesting thing I just wanted to mention quickly, I was with the governor at the press conference announcing the improvement in the law from secondary to primary. I was at the press event, and I think that's where I first met you, Ben.
Yeah, the governor asked me to
When they
speak there.
increased the penalty points to 5 points. But the last time that we looked, and I admit I haven't done it recently, but what was interesting is when they increased the points, we saw the number of plea bargains increase quite substantially. So that may be another issue that policymakers might want to look at, that if we're going to up the fines, but the judges are knocking down the tickets, are we really getting anywhere? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
It's very useful.
You know, it's interesting. The AAA did this great study where they gave it, I think it was, they gave a discount to teenagers to have a camera in the car. And it was remarkable to me watching the video of it and the,
Well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. We did do in-car was kind of a groundbreaking study in
it's
camera.
remarkable, yeah.
NHTSA estimates that 1% of teens were being distracted and getting crashes. Our in-camera study said it was actually
58%.
right, quite
So-
a bit more.
Because you
so-
go by statistics that, and police aren't getting the information, so they're estimating it, the lowest was 1%, the highest was 14%. And you had a camera in the car, and these kids knew that it was a camera in the car, and it was 58%. So it's a problem. You
Yeah.
talk about, Rob's talking about the addiction and things like that. And by the way, behavior changes, drunk driving behavior changed. So we don't smoke 3 packs of cigarettes anymore a day, and people wear seatbelts. Behavior could change, but you gotta address the problem.
Oh,
Just
agreed.
one quick thing.
Yes.
Just to your point about raising the points, something to consider is that, you know, we gave 2,000 tickets. Now, people don't plead guilty to these
No.
tickets because it's 5 points.
Right.
So our courts quickly got overwhelmed with people. So we had to deal with that. So just something to consider also.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna give out a ton of tickets, you also gotta realize that nobody's gonna be pleading guilty. They're gonna all be plead not guilty. You're getting trials, and it's a big drain on resources. So sometimes just raising the points has that unintended consequences of overwhelming your courts.
I just, 2 things I want to point out. One question is, if we were to pass the bill or some iteration of the bill that addressed people's concerns, how long would it take for your company to develop the technology, assuming we were going along the path we're discussing here?
Our R&D advised me it would take us about 6 months to have a product ready for general availability. That could be expedited, but that's the general estimate.
And then departments would have to buy like in Westchester, and Vic Mallison's here, maybe we can answer. If we did this a pilot, Westchester County Police, I think, would have to buy the technology, right?
I can't answer that.
That's not your part.
But we do pilots all the time where we lend law enforcement agencies technology to do proof of concept and pilots. So I wouldn't say you have to purchase it initially.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the finances aren't gonna get in the way of this.
Yeah.
No, I understand. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
I can almost commit, we'll give you the technology.
He just committed, he's gonna give it.
Committed.
I think it's on camera.
Okay.
He went from not being able to commit to 100% committed.
So, Vic
See,
Mal,
anybody can get used to a camera.
Vic Mallison is here representing County Executive George Latimer. Vic, you want to add anything?
The only thing I would want to ask is, do you think that there is any possibility of working with our constitutional scholar here with an actual version of one of these pieces of equipment to determine the specific constitutionality of the specific device?
I don't see why not. Absolutely.
I've dealt with the management of Celebrate. I've spoken in detail. We've identified technology, like Rick's, for lack of a better word, is a constitutional scholar. There's technology scholars that are available also that could, and there's also something called the Industry Standard of Technology. And Celebrate is very willing to open up their codes to an independent party to verify this. Nobody's going to put anything out on the road unless there's an extremely high level of confidence that this is doing exactly what it says.
Good. I know, Mark Garner's here from Allstate.
I'm gonna, what do they say in Congress? I'm gonna defer or lend my time.
Lend your time
Speaker
to
from
Ellen.
NIDA.
Okay, I know. Ellen
Yeah.
Mengione.
I think Ellen can speak really on behalf of the industry. I
Good.
could talk about Allstate, but it's really more of an industry problem.
Thank you. Thank you for being here,
Thanks.
Ellen.
As you said, I represent the New York Insurance Association, so many of our member companies write autos in New York here. And this is truly an epidemic. We have more people on the road today than we ever have before. We have more people using cell phones, and people are driving longer distances, and cars are safer. So why are fatalities climbing 15% in the last 2 years when they were on a decline? And we really believe that it's largely due to distracted driving. I appreciate everyone's interest today. I think Rick, you did a great job answering some of the concerns around the constitutionality of it. Mo, I think you answered hopefully a lot of the concerns that
very
some
well.
folks had about the privacy of this and what it actually captures and what it doesn't capture. Driving requires total focus and concentration on the road. We heard from AAA that 2 seconds can double the risk of a crash. New York has been determined to be one of the most distracted driving states in the country, according to a study by Life 360. I really encouraged, we tried to move this bill last year when it was statewide, and people they want this in little bites. We have to change public opinion about this. This is exactly like drinking and driving. It's going to take time. It's going to be little increments till people get comfortable with this. I hope in 10 years from now, we look back at this roundtable and what's being said and the concerns, and that we look back the same way that we look at alcohol right now. So we're very supportive of this bill. We really hope that you're able to move it this year. I know it's on the Senate Transportation Committee tomorrow. We're very encouraged by that, and we're here to answer any questions that anyone has about this. Hopefully we can get some movement on it this year and just start with Westchester, because there are no numbers, there are no statistics to demonstrate how bad this problem really is. And I think if this bill passes and this pilot program is put into place, you're gonna be astonished at what comes out of it.
So,
Madam Chair?
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I just, I'm not sure if I missed it earlier, but we spoke about the penalties as a deterrent and points on your license and so forth. Does this bill, for example, potentially tie in the driver safety course curriculum to make it mandatory that part of the curriculum focuses on this topic of safety among
Distracted.
others?
That's a good point.
I don't know.
What was the question?
About the driving ed, particularly in the schools, I think,
Well, no, not just in schools. In other words, to
Safety
get
class.
point
Class.
reduction.
Well,
Oh,
Rob,
the-
Rob,
Yeah,
Rob,
we-
Rob could answer that. He's actually implemented that, and it's a fantastic program.
You mean in
In
post-conviction?
other words,
And you get the-
technically, if anybody gets points, you can reduce 2 points.
Yes,
by-
he's-
We
by-
actually,
They've implemented
we're
it.
a sponsor of the driver improvement program in New York State. Our instructors do speak to it. I don't think it's mandated to be part of the
Candace.
curriculum.
I don't
Yeah.
know if lighting's mandated in that
Right.
program, actually, in the law.
They'll be the first to get
Yeah.
next year.
Okay,
Well, no,
we
you
can
can
have,
do it in the law.
We don't have the ability to reduce points in Newcastle, but it's a voluntary program, and it's something, if somebody takes the program, it's taken into consideration,
oh,
because we don't have the
Yeah.
ability to,
reduce the,
yeah.
But
Oh,
they-
it's a victims impact panel, and the speakers are Steve and J.C., some people might have seen, they're victims of distracted driving. And so we have, it's like a 40-minute course, people come in, take that 40-minute course, and then we'll be willing to, I mean, we're looking at that favorably when they want to make a plea before trial.
I would imagine DMV sets out regulations on what needs
What's
to
in the
be in the
plans.
courses, so I don't
They
think it's a
do,
law.
yeah, they do.
So we can write a letter
Yeah,
to,
we can ask.
you know, perhaps to them to encourage a more robust curriculum.
Mhm.
I know Candace Leitner just joined us. Candace, hi.
Hi.
So Candace,
To give you a little background about
Yeah.
Candace, she's started, Candace, basically all this issue about drunk driving, we had Candace lost her daughter in the early 80s and started Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and just started a massive movement, and it's been a very, she's been a mentor to me and somebody I admire a lot, but she started Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and now she's, has We Save Lives, but there's been TV movies on her and that type of stuff, and we're very fortunate that she came here and to speak also on this.
thank you.
Thank you.
So we'd
What
like
do
you
want
to,
me say?
I want you to,
I just joined, so why don't you, tell me what we're doing here in terms of,
okay. We're in the midst of discussing this bill, which would have a pilot program for the use of a Textalyzer to be developed, but we're fairly far down the road. And to really begin to study and provide some tools for law enforcement in Westchester County alone as a pilot project, with a report due at the end, to try to address distracted driving where we really do not have the technology. And I think one of the things that was spoken at, Ben spoke about at the beginning, were the analogies with the opposition to the rules on drunk driving. And obviously a number of members have been concerned about the constitutional limitations of looking at someone's phone after an accident. And I assume you dealt with some of that at the beginning of MAD.
well, actually, we did, and all the way through MAD, we did. But, and I just have to tell you that we do call these issues crashes, because there's nothing accidental about driving distracted. It's a choice that someone makes, and choices are not accidents. Just to let you know that I feel very strongly about that word.
Thank you for
Especially
correcting
as a survivor of a distracted driving crash, and my daughter, as you know, was killed by a drunk driver. So we did, and I have to tell you, my concern lies with the safety of the public, and also with the survivors and the victims. And I understand that people are concerned about constitutional issues, etc. But to me, the benefit of the majority outweighs the concerns of the few. And we were always able to show that this was you could decline, for example, the breathalyzer. You didn't have to take it. And as or I don't know if Ben mentioned this, I have been involved in pilot projects on oral fluid devices to determine how many people are driving drugged. And we always have them sign a form that said they either would take it, agreed to it, wasn't going to be used in court or not. And the numbers that we got from doing these pilot projects were unbelievable, in terms of letting us know how serious the problem was. And that's what we're trying to do now, is to determine how serious is this problem, and then what are the solutions. And to me, there is no pilot project worth doing if you're not going to look at it from a solution-oriented policy perspective.
Well, thank you very much. People have questions for Candace? You on this issue of the, no, you're good?
Yeah.
Other questions? Candace, where are you?
I'm in Virginia, outside
okay.
of DC.
Okay. Well, thank you for correcting me on the use of the language. I appreciate that. And I think we are trying to use the experience of MAD as sort of a template, right?
Exactly.
To move ahead and address this problem in a way that we think can pass the New York State Legislature. Obviously, we're open to changes, right, Amy?
Yes.
You know, we want.
Distracted.
She's distracted. We want to get this bill passed. We think that limiting it to one county, which the county supports it, there's a little bit of analogous experience in the town of Newcastle, and this bill requires a report at the end on basically the success or failures or the lessons learned, as well as having a willing partner from a technology standpoint, which I think is a tremendous benefit. We're very, very appreciative of your willingness to work with us. So, you know, we're hopeful that, we only have 6 weeks left here.
I think we need a home rule for a pilot.
We'll need a home rule, but I think with the county executive, and I assume the county board's support, that shouldn't be a problem, once we're ready to move ahead. What? David Buckwell wants to say something too.
No, I simply want to thank Senator Mayor and Bill Movement, who I have the honor of representing the State Assembly. It's co-sponsored a statewide bill, but it's really, you know, it's an effort to move this issue forward. And I want to obviously thank our police chief and council supervisor from Newcastle as well. Also, representing Newcastle has been taking the lead on this front. But, you know, fundamentally, I think, you know, what we have to work through is just how do we, you know, make progress on this issue? Because, you know, I think, you know, it's about more than just quantifying how big a issue it is. It's how do we then link, you know, what I think will be the results to public safety. And I'd love to hear whether, I don't know whether statistics or analysis was done when this was a statewide bill, but would Westchester residents be expecting to receive in a few years' time a lower insurance rate? Because that would presumably be one of the goals. It's obviously not, primary goal is public safety, but obviously if we're successful in that effort, one would like to think for either property or physical damage. You know, it's one of the reasons to think that there actually is broad support for this. I think, you know, I certainly have never heard any.
I think saving lives is the most important thing,
without a doubt.
right? I mean.
But unfortunately, people have this sense of it will never be that. We have that in a whole host of public safety areas, whereas, fortunately, everyone does think they'll be paying for car insurance. So whatever the right arguments are, and obviously we do have to work with the chairman to try to make sure that we're both passing a formal constitutional test, which is what the press has been very good at, but also just the general concerns, constitutional or not, about privacy, and figuring out, you know, what are going to be the consequences? What's going to be the benefit of putting forward the pilot? But please be representative of Westchester in a forum like this.
Yes.
With the insurance, it seems to me, I'm actually part of NISLA, New York State Trialists, so we're on the opposite side of the V most of the time.
We're on the good side.
Right.
Mark would say you're in good hands.
Opposite side. So, what I would say is, I mean, if somebody gets arrested for drunk driving, their rates, besides causing an accident, right? If you get arrested for drunk driving and you cause an accident, your rates are going up.
Right.
And I would imagine it would be the same thing with distracted driving. You could prove somebody caused an accident and they were distracted, that person's rate's gonna go up even more. So, to your point, it seems to me that at least you're gonna be holding the people accountable who are causing all these accidents and are more of a danger on the road. And that, in essence, would reduce the price for other people as well, besides just across the board discount. But I'm just saying, but being able, knowing the cause of the accidents and holding them accountable.
Are the insurance rates determined?
Crash, I'm
They are
sorry.
for healthcare
Crash,
in
crash,
an area? You know, in other words, if
They have different territories.
So could you let us know what territory, because that would be the answer to David's question. You know, if the territory was the county, or it could become the county, then by raising one group's rates, because they would be arguably, most accidents would be one county resident against another, you would be lowering the rest if it was in that territory.
You, Candace, you.
I do. Let me intervene here, and thank you for correcting the word accidents and using crash. However, the problem is that, and for example, I was involved in a distracted driving crash here in Virginia, which broke my back. And the woman admitted to driving distracted, but when the police officer gave her a ticket, it was for driving too close. So the problem we have here is that they're not always identifying these people as distracted drivers. It depends upon the laws in the state. So the insurance isn't necessarily going to go up unless they're actually identified as a distracted driver. That's the reason that the crash occurred. That's what they're cited for, etc. And in the case of distracted driving, unlike drunk driving, you just don't get that end result. You don't. Law enforcement is, with all due respect, is really not always identifying these people as driving distracted. They use all kinds of other terms, and part of the reason why is because they can't prove it.
Yeah, I think, yes, and this is intended to move that along. I would say, one thing I think we're not sort of focusing on, to me, as a driver in Westchester, is even among those who text and drive or use their phones, they are very aware that everyone else is doing it. It is sort of the common secret of all these drivers. You didn't even explain how long, well, you did, 6 months.
Yeah.
Were you personally had to subpoena the records? I mean, but you, in your gut, I think you presumed that this is what was happening. Now I believe that if you ask most drivers what is going on next to you at a red light, they will say the person is texting. It is common knowledge that people are doing this all over the place. And this is a step forward. I agree we need to have it meet the objections, both technical and philosophical, that not just you, Mr. Magnarelli, but other people have raised, and certainly I know the Civil Liberties Union did last year. And of course, we're willing to meet with them and talk to them about, and try to address concerns. But I think we've narrowed the scope of the bill. It's very helpful to have you here, Chief, to sort of say how it analogizes to another voluntary test, which is all we're trying to do here. But I think we feel the need, at least I do, quite passionately, to get our foot in the door and to begin to address this problem. And I want to give Ben, who's sort of been just a force of nature in trying to make sure that New York State addresses this issue. So unless there's additional questions, are there additional comments, questions? And I want to thank you so much, both of you, for being on. And again, thanks to Emiliana of my staff who put together this excellent panel and group. And yes.
I'm sorry, I'm Silvana, I represent Senator Ritchie's office, and I do have 2 quick questions.
Sure.
The first would be just to add Spotify and iTunes into the jargon when you talk about distracted driving, just because people don't even think of that
Good
as
point.
distracted driving.
Yep.
The second would be a question more to Mr. Cook about self-driving cars and where technology is actually going. So Teslas are able to drive themselves, and I know some friends with Teslas who can make the drive itself and then can text on the side. So would that warrant a ticket, or is that something that is that something you would detect, or?
So I've got no expertise around Tesla and what they do with self-driving vehicles. And I don't know.
So, look, I've done a lot of research in where self-driving vehicles are, and it's a lot further away than you think it is. And again, this is detecting whether you're illegal typing or swiping on your device. Matter of fact, Tesla does something that's disgusting, actually. They have a very big screen on their dashboard that you could actually access Facebook. I have a picture in my presentation of Facebook on a moving Tesla. And you know what? It's legal.
Yeah.
NHTSA gives guidelines, but it's legal. This is not dealing with that. This is dealing with, we have a law right now in place. Unfortunately, we can't enforce that, and this is what that's doing, is enforcing that law. But don't count on self-driving cars to bail you out, because if that's what you're waiting for, more people die from this than Americans died in the Vietnam War.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Thank
Well,
you.
New York State is one of the only states that still requires one hand on the wheel.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And then
Yeah, I don't think we've
all
changed
this
that,
keyboard
right?
usage
We
as
have
well,
not.
I'm assuming the
Still have to have one
technology would
here.
also
Technically.
take account
Yeah.
for Face ID, because that doesn't include any type of contact with the screen.
Face ID to unlock the device or
Yeah.
open the screen?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
that now,
Yeah,
yeah.
just making sure, because it wasn't mentioned.
That's good, thank you for, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions, including a few for Mr. Cook.
Could you identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Justin Harris, I'm an attorney with the ACLU of New York.
Uh-huh, good.
I was wondering, you said that it detects swipes.
No, it will detect swipes. We
Okay.
understand how to do it. This prototype does not, but it will detect
Okay,
swipes.
does it detect the direction in which the swipes are made?
I would have to ask the technologist when they present that.
Okay,
Today, I do
because
not know that.
one thing that popped into my head was that a lot of people, to unlock their phones, have to swipe a pattern on the screen of the phone.
Okay.
So what you may be doing is inadvertently asking somebody to reveal how to unlock that phone if it records the direction in which the swipes are made.
We've got no indication that it's gonna.
Okay,
record
but that was,
direction as
that was something that
Okay.
came to mind.
That's a-
When you say that it records certain kinds of data, including phone calls outgoing as well as incoming phone calls that are answered, does it record the numbers, the phone numbers?
It does not.
Okay. Can the Textalyzer tell if the phone was being used by a passenger? Say, for example, I'm driving the car, I hand it to my
No,
passenger.
that's,
and say,
that's a very good question, but that's more of a protocol issue. And the way we've addressed that is so far we want to bring the technology out, which is not in that area.
Mhm.
And so the quick answer to that, which most people get comfortable, is because we spent a lot of time on this specific issue, so thank you for asking that. But the way we do is we err on the person being innocent, okay? And basically what that means is that if the driver and the passenger say that it was the passenger using the phone, then the officer has no ability to cite a violation there. Now, the concern could be the efficacy of this then, and because people could perjure themselves. And AT&T did a really comprehensive study that showed that well, first of all, let me take one step back. At least 65% of the population don't drive with a passenger. That's why there are carpool lanes. That's why on the LIE you're stuck in 3 lanes and 1 lane's buzzing by. So that's how that could exist. So now you're dealing with a population of 35%. AT&T did a study that 70% of the population, if they have a passenger in the car, is not likely to use their phone. A couple of reasons for that. One is the other person's not going to let them. 2 is that they're not bored, because that's a major reason why you pick up the phone. And the most important reason is exactly what you're saying. You'll hand the phone to a passenger. So you're down to roughly about 10% of the population. Will there be perjury? Will somebody fraud? Yeah, there will be. It's a lot better off than having 0%, because right now in New York State, there were 256,000 crashes, and only a mere 64 of them were listed as texting and driving. We're not addressing the problem. So it's a risk, it's a way to address the problem by erring on the innocent and still not having too much damage to the efficacy of it.
Okay. I had a couple more hypotheticals, though. Well, suppose the phone is in a hands-free device. It's sitting on the dashboard. I get into an accident, and it goes flying out of the hands-free device and is laying somewhere in the phone. Laying somewhere in the car. Presumably the Textalyzer can't tell if that's happened, right? Or if I'm using the speakerphone on my car, but not a hands-free device, the phone is just sitting in the passenger seat. I've got both hands on the wheel, and I'm talking into the speakerphone.
We do believe it will be able to provide voice activation. That
Okay.
is something that you can tell from logs.
Physical typing and swiping is what this is detecting. Voice activation and Bluetooth is differentiated.
Okay.
It'll differentiate it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. I had technical questions. That was it. Thank you.
And again, we're happy to continue to have a conversation.
Yeah, we'll have
We've
a-
tried to narrow it to, I think, meet some of the concerns of before, and obviously, we're very anxious to see if we can get it done this session.
Yeah, and I don't want to flesh out a legal discussion in
Yes,
this
that's fine.
meeting, but we have Fourth Amendment concerns, and the courts have shown some willingness to start to protect metadata, and not just the substance of what's on the phone. But we'll address those in a paper, I'm sure, or in subsequent meetings.
Which court precedent are you talking about?
I'm talking about Carpenter from 2018, as well as the Second Circuit's opinion in
Okay,
ACLU versus Clapper.
right, Carpenter was about getting data for 90 days, and over that 90 days, they were able to place somebody at a location.
Yeah.
And so that was using what they call the mosaic theory.
Yeah.
And so this is basically going back, we'll call it 15 minutes from the crash, where that mosaic theory can't exist.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Right. And Rick Simmons can comment about that if I missed anything.
I think that's right about Carpenter. I guess I wouldn't characterize Carpenter as metadata. It was location data, and again, it was over a much longer period of time than we're talking here, so.
Yeah, I'm aware, and
Carpenter's looking for this information.
yeah, I'm aware that both Carpenter and ACLU versus Clapper from the Second Circuit in 2015 both involved bulk collection. And certainly I'm familiar with the mosaic theory. But in both of those cases, it was metadata, and my comment was that the courts have shown some willingness. There's been no direct protection of metadata yet, but they're certainly headed in that direction. But like I said, we'll have a much more substantive discussion about this in the future at some point, I'm sure.
Good.
Good.
Open to talk anytime. We've met with Donna Lieberman
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Yes, one last question, then, I know some of us have to go, like,
I know.
we have confidence.
How
We
far
have a-
back do the records collect the data? Is it just for that one day, or is it going back?
That's something that will be added into the tool based off of legislation, so. if we
we're
wanna
thinking in
limit
the
that-
area about 15 minutes, but that's,
Thank
it's gonna depend on whatever the municipality. Again, that's something that has to be designed for them.
Thank you.
So with that, I want to thank all the participants and all the, certainly all the legislative members, all the staff, and thank you for engaging with this. I mean, I think this was very useful in sort of hoping to educate and provide some comfort to people that we are really talking about a limited effort to begin to push this down the road. We're just not going to stand on the sidelines and do nothing. And, you know, again, credit to Ben and for your leadership on this. And I'm sure Amy and I and our colleagues will all work together. You know, hopefully this bill will move tomorrow in the Senate Transportation Committee, and we can move this conversation along.
I can't thank everybody enough for taking the time to care about the issue and sit in this room and discuss it, whether you agree or not. It just means the world that people are interested in and are willing to talk about it, so I can't thank you enough.